Okie dokie, hello everybody and welcome back to the Jack Throlfall Show Sports.com Monaco Series. I'm joined today by Paul Jordan. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, lovely to be with you, here with you.
Fantastic. Well, could you just explain a little bit for the viewer about your history, your current role in motorsport and what brings you here to the Sports.com boat this weekend?
Certainly. So here effectively to head up the Saudi Motorsport company, which is effectively a brand new company from Saudi Arabia, obviously.
Yep.
And it's been incorporated to run and develop all the motorsport within the kingdom. So, and we are developing a partnership with Sports.com. So, hence me being here at the Monaco Grand Prix. In terms of my background, that goes way back, Jack. That's I think
we've got plenty of time. So.
It starts in 1980, and obviously is still continuing. So, fire away and ask whatever you wish.
And it was motorcycles for you. That was the first entrance into motorsport. What was it about the excitement, the danger, the atmosphere of motorcycle racing that drew you in as a young man?
Well, if I'm perfectly honest, I stumbled across it by mistake. I fell into motorsport, which I think maybe a lot of people have done, you know, from previous careers or journeys that have crossed into motorsport. And I'm sure many people who have said to you on interviews is that you get bitten by the bug. I'm sure you've found this yourself.
Absolutely.
And I was, I think in 1980, I was selling motorcycle accessories.
Okay. And
the owner of the company then said to me, would I like to take 2 weeks holiday in the Isle of Man TT?
Incredible.
I of course said no. Why would I want to go to the Isle of Man TT for 2 weeks? My own holiday, I may add, at my own expense, and in a sport that I really didn't know anything about. Obviously, most people have heard of the Isle of Man TT, so I wasn't naive to actually what it entailed and what the sport was about on the island. But I wasn't into motorsport. You know, it wasn't my. So anyway, cut a very long story short. Fast forward, I went, and we were running then. There's different types of racing within 2 weeks. So the first week is practice week, second week is race week, and there's a senior TT. You don't really need to understand what that means. Then there was the Formula One round of the World Championship. In those days, the bikes had a big 4-stroke engine, so it was called the Formula One World Championship. It only entailed 4 races, but it was still named that. And one of the rounds was at the Isle of Man TT race. And then you had the junior category and the sidecar. There was about, I think, maybe 10 categories. And Alec, who owned the company that I went to work for, he ran a guy in a senior TT, which is a guy called Phil Reed. And for those that do listen to this and are passionate about motorcycles and motorbike racing, Phil Reed was 7 times world champion.
Right. His
nemesis was Mike Howard, and if you do the history books, you'll see how phenomenal Phil Reed was, and Mike Howard. I mean, they were legends. And then we ran a young guy. Sadly, he's no longer with us, and didn't die at the TT. Fortunately, Jeff Johnson.
Right.
Phil Reed, unfortunately, the bike didn't last, so he didn't finish the race. But Jeff, in the Formula One race, I think we finished 4th, maybe 4th or 5th. Phenomenal result against the factory team. So Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Yamaha, etc. So. It was great. I have to say that it bitten me, you know, and I wanted more.
And it was the noise, the atmosphere, the crowd getting behind the riders, and kind of that closeness that the paddock felt, I think, in that era is what people remember, the openness of the
I mean, obviously the TT is, as you've just rightly said, it's very open. It's not, obviously you've got the big factory teams, but you've got the people that have, you know, saved all their hard-earned cash to do this race, you know.
Yep.
So I don't know if you've been, Joe, but it's unlike any other event that I've ever attended, and to this day, it's got its unique status. People obviously have their opinions on it, but that's not for this show. Yeah. So anyway, cut a very long story short. Alec, who owned the team and the company, said to George, who is the mechanic, an incredible guy, George Jejic, Polish guy, who's remained to this day a very good friend of mine, because we got a good bundle of points.
Yeah.
Asked if George would like to continue and do the other rounds, which was Assen, Villarreal, and then Brands Hatch.
Incredible.
So, and George said yes, and okay, how are we going to do it? So we both had day jobs. I went back to selling motorcycle accessory parts for Alec and his company, and George went on. He was running a bike shop as a mechanic. So, but Alec, in the meantime, purchased a van, Toyota Hiace, if I remember, and a caravan, a second-hand caravan, a very bad second-hand caravan. And so what George and I did is that we continued and did the other races. Put the bike in the back of the van and slept in the caravan, and it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Come to Brands Hatch, and I think we finished fifth or fourth in the World Championship, Formula 1 World Championship, Bike World Championship, against Honda and Suzuki and Kawasaki and stuff. So, on a minor budget, and
in the deep end.
Yeah, but it was pretty much. Like my whole journey in motorsport, it's never been a job.
Sure.
If you go into motorsport and you treat it as a job, you will not survive, because it doesn't work and operate like any other industry, as I'm sure you understand.
We spoke on this show with Martin Whittaker yesterday, and what he was so passionate about with his role with Saudi Motorsport Company was bringing what you just mentioned there, that level of access, that excitement, that passion that people in motorsport share, to the new world in the Middle East, allowing that investment to flow into the sport, to build a generation of engineers, of drivers, of marketing directors, all those roles within motorsport to a new part of the world, and kind of allow them to share in this international thing. Is that what motivated you to kind of take your current role?
Yeah, I mean, historically Saudi, and it is changing, and it's being changed, under the leadership of Prince Khalid and Martin, that we need to build a legacy. And while to kickstart motorsport in the kingdom, they paid for it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we've paid a premium. But the pendulum is turning now. So people want to come and race in Saudi Arabia. What we must do and maximise is that all this investment that we're putting into motorsport is that we leave something for the Saudis to work in. That is part of my role. I'm not really focused on the Formula 1 that Saudi Arabia runs and Martin heads up. My role is more the legacy, the development, bringing and enticing teams can be based in Saudi Arabia, academies. So everything we sign now, from WRC to MotoGP and everything in between, we have to make sure that there's an element attached to it that we can pass on to the young Saudis.
For sure.
Otherwise, we'll have failed. If we don't leave a legacy, we don't leave an academy, or if we don't develop the motorsport and grow it, there's no point in spending all the millions that we do to bring it to the kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. And when was it then that you made that jump from motorcycle racing to open wheel Formula racing, and kind of what inspired that? Was it just that F1 was kind of viewed as that pinnacle of motorsport, the highest value, the most expensive tracks, the best drivers? Was that kind of what drew your eye? Once you'd been bitten by the bug, the passion grew and grew and grew to Formula 1.
I mean, I'd always tell people it's best to be honest with anybody in motorsport. And from when I entered in the sport, 1980, 81, I've never had a plan.
Right.
So I can't sit here and say that I was, I went from motorbikes and I had a strategic viewpoint of where I wanted to be at a certain point. No, not at all.
Okay.
I effectively was a gopher. For those that are listening, that's the person that has no qualifications, and you clean the tyres, you clean the bodywork, and you're a general helper. That's how I started, and so my apprenticeship really was from a gopher in Honda, factory team, which was fantastic for me as my first. Well, it was my second opportunity in motorsport to work for a factory Honda team, as sort of training as a mechanic as I went along. I was 3 years at Honda. The transition was really, I'd left Honda, I'd not fallen out with them at all, but I wanted to do something different, and I saw a job advertised for a team that's no longer with us. It was a German team called ATS, run by Gunther Schmidt, who's sadly no longer with us. He made wheels, ATS wheels. The team was called ATS,
right.
Formula One team. And lucky for me that the team manager, first he was a British guy, and he designed motorcycle fairings.
Right.
So
there was that relatability there.
Well, he obviously, when he saw my CV that I'd worked for Honda and the private team, he felt that, I suppose, quite comfortable with me coming aboard. So
awesome.
I went to work, lived in Germany, and my job really for the Formula One team, I was the turbo man. I changed the turbos. That's all I did.
And they were huge back in the day, right?
Well, we ran the 1.5cc BMW engine as the factory engine, but in a customer car, we just ran one car. And the first half of the season, we had a Manfred Winkelhock who was running in the car, and he died sadly in a Group C race in Motorsport in Canada. And then we gave Gerhard Berger his first drive in Formula One. So yeah, so that was again a unique experience, and learning additional elements from mechanical side within the Formula One team, which is a lot more complex, obviously, but incredibly enjoyable. But I was the only, apart from Colin Seeley, who was the team manager, I was the only English person in the German team, which is fairly challenging. But that's probably, that story is for another time, maybe. But unfortunately, the team was sort of defunct at the end of the year, so I was left without a job. I ended back at Honda. I went back to Honda for a year and worked with Wayne Gardner, who's actually here today. So Wayne is here today. So
incredible.
Yeah. So I went back to Honda, and we won the World Championship with Wayne. So yeah.
And we spoke earlier about the importance of the TT and kind of a motorsport culture for that part of the world. And I think Wayne Gardner, with his history, his legacy in Australian motorsport, is a perfect example of that too, when he was able to bring that World Championship back to Wollongong, I believe.
Yeah.
And the parades through the streets, the legacy he's created. And of course now MotoGP fans will recognise Remy Gardner, his son, competing, winning the Moto2 World Championship, I believe, in 2021. And I think, that's just such a brilliant story, and for everyone out there to know that almost that rise is possible from the go for a roll to the start, and what that will have enabled you to kind of to know every part of the team, right? Because you can imagine this stereotype of an executive coming in who doesn't have that experience from the ground up. You were so much better informed to know how to kind of push the team in the right direction from kind of a technical and a motivational standpoint, I suppose. Yes,
I mean, everybody in the sport has to do an apprenticeship. Whichever, a driver or a rider.
Yep.
You cannot come in straight into Formula. I mean, there are a few that have gone from Formula 3 to Formula 1, and from Moto2 to Grand Prix, MotoGP.
Only ever the best. Max, Kimi, Marquez.
Yes, it's a limited few. Because it can make it or break you, But those that have survived are the extremely talented ones, and we've seen that to this day. So, and it's no different from my career. I mean, I didn't choose motorsport. Almost motorsport chose me, and it's been very kind and very good to me. So, going back to Honda for 1 year, but I'd had enough of bikes. I think if you go back to, I suppose, my career, I was a salesman, so the commercial was in me somewhere. And all commercial gurus, they may want to say they've got a wonderful title for a commercial director or chief operating officer or chief commercial officer, whatever, but ultimately you're a salesman. Just have a fantastic product to sell at the end of the day. So I wanted to get onto the commercial side. Also, working for a Japanese manufacturer, Honda, you're quite limited on where you can go. You're quite restricted, and quite rightly so. That the Japanese hold the senior positions. So I probably could have carried on, but when I had that year taste of Formula One, I knew that the opportunities within the team were wider and greater. But I just needed, obviously, so I needed a job. So Honda was an option for the year. So I did it and then left again.
For sure. So let's play a kind of a pretend scenario here. Let's imagine that I'm a business owner and you've approached me about a sponsorship opportunity. How do you sell the idea to a company that it's worth investing in a motorsport team, getting their logo on a bike or a car? What value does that provide to a business, and kind of why is it such a powerful and unique opportunity in that way?
Well, firstly, I don't sell.
Okay.
As strange as it may seem, I don't sell, and we do our homework to identify potential targets, corporations, investors, individuals that want to or think they may want to be a part of what we've got as an industry, as an opportunity. I go and meet with them and engage with them first before any conversation is discussed about what potentially could be the partnership opportunity.
Right.
So I always tell people is you don't need to sell what we've got. You know, what you need to do is to try and find and understand what it is that we could do for that organisation and what they could do for us.
Yeah.
Now normally that revolves around if it's a pure cash dollar sign deal, that obviously with a team we can benefit from that hard earned investment, you know, to make the team more competitive.
Yeah.
But it's a partnership, and to identify what that partner, what that sponsor, that individual, that corporation, how they could best use what we have to offer. You know, so it's, I suppose in layman's terms, is that you make a shirt or a garment, you need to advertise that product. You know, what's the best route to market to give the greatest exposure for in sometimes a minimum amount of investment. You know, who's going to get the most eyeballs, etc. So it's like really identifying partners that we feel, and that's not in, one should never assume that that's what they're going to think about what we've got to offer. But you know, as I say, if you do your homework, you look at the industries, how they're changing, how they're developing, who's coming through, who wants greater exposure, and you try and marry the two together. But I never sell.
Okay.
So.
And if we skip forward a little bit, you mentioned working with Gerhard Berger at his first Formula One races. You also worked with Minardi when Fernando Alonso made his debut, right? He's eyeing a victory here this weekend. A lot of people in the media have been saying that maybe Red Bull's straight line speed advantage won't be so great here. The Aston Martin is closer maybe to the Red Bull in high downforce circumstances. When you first met Fernando, did you tell from that moment what a star he may be in the sport and what a legend he would turn into with that staying power of maybe more than any other driver to spend 20 years in Formula One?
I've never been able to talent spot. Okay. It's not my, you know, it's certainly not my forte, but there are certain individuals that you remember that have the edge, a USP, you know, different.
Yeah.
And obviously he's developed that unique energy and ability that he so greatly carries. Phenomenal, you know. Yeah. But there are equally there, you know, I'm sure a lot of talent spotters have got it wrong.
Yeah.
You know, Max's father, Jos, was very quick as a driver. But where, you know, sometimes I would say I've been incredibly fortunate in my motorsport career. Sort of one door's closed and the one's open. Instead, I've never had a plan. You know, it's harder for a driver and for a rider, you know, because you're limited in the options. You know, okay, there's a great deal of motorsport, but when you've worked at the pinnacle, at Jos has obviously Benetton,
for sure.
Minardi, etc., and I think Arrows. I think he ran in Arrows. If that stops, you know, you can go sideways, I suppose, you know, to your Le Mans, Group C, Indy racing, yeah. But you are still quite limited. So, but my point was that he was an extremely quick driver. Maybe wrong place, wrong time. I can't remember what his history was in terms of having accidents. I can't remember, but
well, there's the
he had the fire, didn't he?
Fire. Yeah. What came to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, that looked horrific. Yeah, in fact,
to get back in a car after that requires a hell of a mentality.
Yeah, but then look at Roman Grosjean.
For sure.
You know, so
he's gone on to have incredible success the last couple of years in IndyCar. I mean, he's challenging for the title this year.
A very underrated driver.
Absolutely.
And a super nice guy.
Yep.
Super nice guy. So yeah. I mean, going back to Alonso. He's an incredible driver. I mean, especially how he's just continued.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like he's got better.
And so many different teammates throughout the years.
Yeah.
That he's always put a gap on.
I think one of his...
Apart from maybe Lewis, there'll be people watching now wanting to throw that in there.
Yeah, I mean, you can carve out a number of greats and you can see, I'm sure you know most of them on the tip of your tongue. But I think what he has, firstly, his fitness level.
Yeah.
which is, I know these cars are easier to drive. You know, they made it easier for the driver, but his mental strength, I think, is unparalleled to anybody else in the pit lane.
Absolutely. And did you also have interactions with Michael Schumacher early on in his career? Did you feel almost a similar kind of gold dust in a young Michael?
I think when I was at Jordan's, I think we all knew that he was. If you think back, you know, to his career before he came to Formula One,
sports cars,
yes,
junior Formula.
yeah, he was undoubtedly a champion. You know, quick. What was quite funny is that I saw Eddie earlier on in this week that he did tell a bit of a porky pie that he hadn't raced at Spa.
Right.
So he said he had, and he missed the Friday session. If you look back through the history books, he missed the Friday session. I can't remember why. Eddie and I were talking about it on Monday. So qualifying P7.
Yeah. First go. And what a car as well, that 91 car, I think you talk about the legacy of design and commercial partnerships and just iconic images. That the 7-Up car, right, was the 91 Jordan. That's up there with maybe the 88 McLaren, 2004 Ferrari type level of iconic Formula One cars.
Yeah,
not only because of the story, but also the colourway, the whole design of it just seemed to fit together perfectly.
Yeah. Gary Anderson, who was our chief designer, who'd come from Reynard Racing Cars, who had designed championship-winning Formula 3000 cars, Formula 3 cars. So, you know, very talented. It was a beautiful-looking car, you know, and it wasn't meant to be green.
Right.
So bizarrely, no. We Eddie Jordan Racing, as it was called, EJR, before we went to Jordan Grand Prix. We'd won everything in Formula 3 and 3000 with Camel, the cigarette brand.
Yellow.
Yeah, and we were. Eddie was adamant that because of our success with the brand, RJ Reynolds, the owner, parent company, that because we were committing to going to Formula One, and they were not in Formula One at the time, the natural progression was for the sponsor to come with us into Formula One. And I remember the day that Eddie come back from the meeting when he was told that the brand were splitting their sponsorship in Formula One with two teams, which was Williams and Benetton.
Yeah.
I mean, so we were all planning for a yellow car.
Interesting.
And obviously we didn't have a yellow car. So, but we were committed, you know, Eddie was committed. And so all hands to deck to get as much money in as physically possible. And Green, obviously, from the Irish standpoint,
right, of course,
as well as the 7-Up and our other partners as well. So it wasn't meant to be a green car.
Fascinating. Yeah. I think what I'm interested to know from your perspective, I think when we look across the history of sponsorship in Formula One era that ended, I suppose, in the mid-2000s was the tobacco sponsorship, right, with those regulations. What shockwaves did that send through the paddock? Because it changed a lot of the logos on the side of the cars, the partnerships. I mean, even maybe like the people remember the Marlboro McLarens and the Ferraris, the Team Spirit Renaults with Fernando. How was that kind of felt through the paddock at the time when those rules changed?
Not a great deal. I mean, obviously, tobacco money was easy money for teams to find and spend. But like anything in life, when it stops, somebody else takes its place.
Sure.
You know, if you've got a group of salespeople that are selling tobacco because that's the prime corporate partner that you can go after, and that's taken away, the 100 salespeople will turn to another product and build it up and create an industry for it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not saying that's how Formula One operates, but in terms of other sponsorship models and other sporting elements. So you switch. You know, you look at an industry that's. I mean, tobacco wasn't an industry that making big money.
Yeah.
You know, you had alcohol, which you still could use.
Yep.
Insurance companies, financial services. You know, there are a lot of industries, but when the monopoly is tobacco, everybody focuses on that small ring. I remember that certain tobacco companies went from one racing team to another racing team. You know, it's very incestuous, Formula One. It's very incestuous motorsport per se. So you just shift, and they did pay big money, big dollars, but equally other industries, and I can't remember teams going bust because tobacco stopped.
Right.
You know, and it was right that it stopped. I mean, I think if you look back through the history books, we had an extension after an extension after extension. You know, probably one would say that Mr. E may have sort of given financial donations to certain political parties to keep the door open.
Interesting.
But I don't know if that's true or not, but just a rumour.
It sounds good on the show. Well, I'm also interested in, we're seeing with junior racing now, Formula 3 and Formula 2 kind of be very centralised with the FIA. That's their ladder to Formula 1, right? Their ideal path is you come in, European Karting World Championship, maybe European Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, and into Formula 1. But what we're seeing is the costs rise and rise and rise for those series, as to where a driver from a particularly rich family or with parents who have particularly rich friends and business partners that can sponsor them, that money is almost a conflict of interest with the singular talent of the drivers. How do you view that from your perspective, and is the solution for the big Formula 1 teams to get involved in sponsorship of drivers just more early on, or to take a more kind of active role in that?
Yeah, the model that's currently in front of us doesn't work. And I know Martin Whittaker and myself and Sean Miller, our Chief Operating Officer, have had meetings with the FIA to understand. They've got some new models that they're looking at.
Yeah.
You know, certain categories being developed so that the financial is not, you know, not the penalty.
So like an F1 Academy, I think, for example, is a good example of that, in a way where they're looking to partner with teams that are already there and try and recruit drivers on a basis of pure talent.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
The teams only have themselves to blame.
Right.
I mean, I personally do not think Formula 1 do enough to really look after what's coming through. But that's a personal view. You know, I'm not saying that's right or that's wrong.
But it's an informed view, though, I think.
Yes, I mean, I'm closer to the sport than a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And we have obviously meetings. I started the show by saying that about our legacy in academies. You know, they're critical. If we don't look after what's coming through, then we don't deserve to have a sport. You know, and the young kids are our future. The young kids are our future, sure. Whatever sport.
Yep.
You know, in every walk of life. So it's important that we don't forget them. And when you look around and there's a shortage of talent, who can you blame? You can only blame the people that are within the sport. You can't say, oh, we got it. You know, somebody else didn't make the car or whatever. You know, so we have to do a lot more for youngsters. You know, Lewis is a great advocate of developing, you know, for lesser fortunate people, you know, sure. Minority, but we don't do enough. We certainly don't do enough. So I think certain the French FFA, I think it's the FFA who run the Formula 4 program. They have a budget cap on their Formula 4 program, which I think is either 120 or 130,000 for a season,
right.
Which is phenomenal for a Formula 4.
Yeah.
When you think if you go to Italy, just across the border, it's 400,000. You know, so it can be done.
And you need basically the Prema engineers if you're going to compete in that series, which are going to be charging the max at the budget cap.
Yeah, so it can be achieved, and the French actually have to do a fantastic job on that side. And it's a model that we have certainly looked at. That as and when we do our own Formula 4 championship in Saudi Arabia, that probably to start with we may not have enough young Saudis to fill the grid.
Right.
That maybe and again, because of our seasons, our race season is really October through to March, so it dovetails well with a European season. They finish their season in October, they come to Saudi Arabia. So, you know, there's a lot of synergies that we can offer between European countries and Saudi Arabia. So, yeah, we have to do more.
So in talking about the future of motorsport, I think what's really important is to get that education right on the scale of the roles that are out there, the spectrum across the junior categories. Like you mentioned, you got your start in motorcycles, now moving to open wheel, you've got touring cars in Australia and America particularly, and just, the kind of the wide scale of that. So how do you approach that then in kind of Saudi Arabia, trying to get that education out there and build a junior ladder that will be sustainable for the future?
It's much more difficult, Saudi, because our baseline is much lower where we're starting. If you think how long motorsport has been in Europe and in England, which is predominantly, where most of the F1 teams are based, and obviously a lot of other teams in different categories of racing. So our baseline is much lower. So it's almost like a reverse. We've got to try and encourage teams to come to Saudi Arabia to then create opportunities to put young Saudis, and they may just be gophers to start with. That because it's not everybody loves motorsport. You've got to see if you enjoy what you want, what the industry holds for you, and what it can give to you. So our sort of baseline is much lower, and more challenging. But it's a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint race. So
absolutely.
But in all the sport, the junior roles are as critical.
I think we can just hear behind us the roars of Formula 3 practice session. Those will be drivers that have willed all through their young lives, starting before teenagers, right? Starting in go-karting tracks, local go-karting tracks. Suddenly you're in a regional championship, a national championship, and I think what really connects with the fans as well. Now we're seeing, I suppose, the coverage of something like Formula 3 and Formula 2 has got so much larger scale, more professional, right? Every race is live streamed commentary, driver trackers. And I think when someone is able to become a fan of someone so early on in their career, the satisfaction that you feel maybe if you watched Charles Leclerc rise up through Formula 3, win Formula 2, and then start winning in Formula 1, that story is so important. And I think we're here with sports.com. I think it's important that we kind of bring them into the conversation and talk about what role they're going to play in their partnership with the Saudi Motorsport Company. So kind of building that foundation for motorsport. How do you feel the partnership between Saudi Motorsport Company and sports.com aids in that goal of kind of building something real and powerful for the future?
Well, I think in a bizarre twist, because sports.com is a new entity, I mean, an incredible brand even at this early stage of its career and its life, it's not too dissimilar from Saudi Motorsport. We are 2 years old, a startup effectively, in a kingdom that has a growth of motorsport beyond my dreams and reality. So I think, and I'm sure people understand watching the show, is that as Saudi Motorsport develops, you think you write a strategy 5-10 years, but that has to be quite flexible, because as you go through the journey, you will turn left maybe and then turn right, go straight a little bit of it. And I think sports.com strategy from now will be very different in 2 years' time, and not because of any reason, but certain things will happen that will develop with certain partners they'll get in bed with, and that then will take them a different direction. So from our standpoint, one of the things I love about sports.com is that while it is sports.com, they're quite keen and interested to look at other elements through Saudi Motorsport in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia,
just to cover as many bases as possible.
Yes, it's in layman's terms a streaming platform that it might be that we've got this footage. We're very proud that we built a company, built a track, had 3 Grand Prix races in 16 months.
Absolutely, and the drivers love the track, right?
Yes.
As soon as they got there, they said, this is awesome. Full high-speed corners, tight walls, challenging even for the best drivers. I look back, I think it's something that will live forever in the history of Formula 1, but Max Verstappen so nearly put together that qualifying lap in 2021 was pushing, track limits like you wouldn't, but like there shouldn't be space there, and he was keeping it just in between the wall and the white lines and just flying. To see him feel motivated to push himself to that limit, I think is something that was built into the track design.
I think I've always felt that was an E-game that he was, but it was him. It was just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So sports.com have got lots of opportunities that we can develop with them through Saudi Motorsport and through our other partners to help grow and develop the brand itself. So I think it's you don't need to be a marketing or a specialist to, when someone says to you what is sports.com speaks for itself, you know.
For sure.
It says what it does, you know.
And I think we can wrap up maybe looking towards Sunday's race. Do you have someone in your mind as a favourite pick, maybe an outsider that, come on, you must have some insider info, someone's told you.
No, I don't.
Is the Mercedes going to work with its new sides?
No, I mean, this may sound quite strange. I'm not a big fan of racing.
Right.
Racing isn't my, it's not my DNA.
Sure.
It's always been the commercial element of the sport.
Okay.
The wonderful thing about, first year predicting rain on Sunday.
Absolutely.
So that'll be interesting. And it can be a bit of a lottery here. I mean, you know that, Jack. I mean, and sometimes it's good to see an outsider.
Yeah.
I remember Eric. Is it Eric Comas? Or was it Comas? No. Who is the French driver in
Panis,
yeah.
Yeah.
Unexpected win.
Amazing.
I
think it was something that Martin actually had mentioned yesterday, that while we've seen Red Bull win every race so far this year, for them to be that far ahead of everyone else, the sport may start to suffer. People may start tuning out if Max is so far ahead. So in many ways, Fernando or Lance or Lewis or George or Charles, I think particularly Charles here, winning would be such an iconic moment for the sport, such a release of emotion there.
Yeah, but Jack, look.
I guess Red Bull wouldn't mind winning it.
Look through the pockets of Formula One. 5 years of domination from Michael Schumacher and Ferrari.
Yeah.
5 years of domination from Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. That's how the sport is. If the other teams are not able to close the gap, I mean, listen, I'm not a fan of Red Bull and not a fan of Lewis or Max. But if the teams are not able to close the gap against Red Bull,
so be it.
So be it. We want F1 to be the most competitive, the most innovative, groundbreaking technology and everything else that Formula 1 stands for. And if Williams, quite clearly Williams haven't got their act together and they took their off the ball 4 years ago, I don't believe in handing. I advocate for 2 more teams to come in.
For sure.
And I think that there should be a knock. The last 2 teams that don't come into the top, shouldn't get the bonus, so that they're not hungry enough at the team.
So why do you think it is then that it seems like maybe Stefano, the management of Formula One at the moment, are keeping those barriers up, particularly Andretti and Cadillac, right? Kind of that main storyline. They've been pushing, building, recruiting even for people to join a Formula One team that hasn't actually yet been granted entrance to the championship. It feels like there's a resistance there to the arguments that you were presenting in favour.
Well, it's two resistance. And for me, and I don't have any inside knowledge, but I would say one is that it dilutes what the other teams get financially. Mm-hmm. Greed, and this sport is greedy.
I suppose.
And secondly, afraid that the Andretti Cadillac may be very competitive.
Be better, yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thank you very much for joining me, Paul. This has been a really fascinating episode, and tune back in for the rest of the week for more stuff from me and sports.com here in Monaco.